I'm Dr. Jacqueline Duget. Welcome to What is Black podcast that focuses on issues important to raising healthy and thriving Black children and adolescents. As a pediatrician and mom of color, I saw the need to create an additional educational platform to reach parents raising kids of color to address issues and challenges that are not always discussed in the pediatrician's office. Thank you for joining us for this week's conversation. My special guest today, Dr. Omolara Thomas Uwemedimo. She's a pediatrician, an associate professor, research, and advocate who has spent her career dedicated to two truths. All children have the right to be healthy, and healthy kids begin with supported moms and families. You created, platforms outside of the pediatric office, right, to sort of meet the needs of parents that we typically can't meet in the 15-minute appointment. And so I just wanted to delve into that a little bit more, and especially kind of focus on your Omolara Health Solutions as well as your SupermomRehab podcast. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about both of those projects that you have and why they were important for you to create.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because if you asked me last year, so even as early as last year, would I be doing this, I would have said, of course not. In this time period right now, we have really, it's been more in our face about what are some of the inequities that exist, and particularly, I think, for us as pediatricians within healthcare. And I think we've known for a long time that families of color experience bias in healthcare. And I know that during that 15 minutes that I'm allotted to see parents, it was never enough. I was always the person who was going over. And I know also as a pediatrician, I've heard countless stories of moms that don't feel listened to and feel very guarded about who they can disclose their real inner thoughts or concerns. Because honestly, for many of them experiencing emotion, our feelings are so often like pathologized, right, as anger or hostility or incompetence. And so I know that Black women aren't monolithic, but I think that one of the most important things of creating this was I found that Black moms and other moms of color have to work harder and do it all just to be seen and heard. And I felt like there was this overcompensation that we feel because of it. And so when we've grown up just doing that all our lives, it's natural for it to just enter into motherhood, and it manifests as a supermom. That's what I think was the idea. And I felt that specifically when I became a mom 7 years ago. I really now understood what moms of color I had been treating were experiencing and how damaging it was for me. To be very honest, it was about a few months ago, over the course of a week, I actually was not able to walk. It's a week I stopped being able to walk and had to be hospitalized. And I was on medical leave, and I had a wake-up call when I realized that while I was in the hospital, my work had to be delegated to 5 people. So my issue wasn't caused by stress, but definitely it was exacerbated by it. So I literally had to make a drastic change from being a supermom. I was trying to do it all, not asking for help. You know how this is, staying silent when I'm struggling. And I didn't want other women to have to experience a life-altering health crisis before they figured out how damaging being a supermom is. So the podcast has really allowed for me to see kind of that common theme between moms of color in this issue and how it's actually perpetuated by the ways we were raised and learning. I think that's been the most important part, even being on this podcast today, just learning from other amazing women how we can stop that cycle. I think those were the driving factors for me.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you're fully recovered and you were able to learn something from that experience that you had. Have you thought about the impact of challenging that historical legacy of being a supermom? Because I've been thinking about it lately. I've been thinking about how, not so much as a mom per se, but as a woman, as a Black woman of color, and we're both high achievers, right? So we're both physicians, and the thought that you have to work twice as hard, right? And how breaking through that secret sauce, so to speak, right? That's sort of been like, I think, in our veins, that's how you get and achieve, is by working harder and harder than anyone else. I'm just wondering, have you thought about, once you sort of break that myth,
what that uncovers, and
yeah,
sort of, kind of address that.
Yeah, well, I've thought about it a lot. I think, one of the things about that mantra of working harder, I felt like even if I've worked harder, it hasn't allowed for me to be more seen or to rise all the way to the upper echelons of whatever organization. And I believe that for the majority of women, it's the women who are actually vulnerable and stay true to who they are, who may develop a voice outside of that lane that actually kind of moves the needle, right? So I think about people who tried to work harder within a system. They're realizing there was this structural racism and glass ceiling, and literally said, okay, I'm going to move out of that. I'm not going to work hard and try to do it that way. I'm going to be myself and really let go and be vulnerable. And we started moving into amazing areas. And so I think about it like that. I think the more vulnerability, or the more ability for us to not think about code switching, but to think about actually being our true self within each within each area that we exist, allows for people to realize that we're going to be seen, and it doesn't give people much of a choice to actually ignore us. And so I think that's one of the things and one of the messages that I've been trying to think about, how motherhood actually, for me, has been that driving force. Being a mother has really pushed me to a point where I was like, okay, I have to be more confident. I can't really sit in the areas that I was and just work hard and hope someone notices me. So I think, for a lot of women, motherhood kind of is that fork in the road, and it's you choosing which way you want to go.
I think that's amazing, the way you kind of put it. You kind of broke it down like that. I'm wondering, as you're working, and I think we'll get to this as well, some of the coaching that you do for moms, and I'm just wondering if that process of kind of like relearning who you are or getting to know yourself as this new mom, this new woman, if that's part of that process of taking off that cape, and like you said, and embracing that vulnerability.
It totally is. So I have a framework that really guides everything that I do, and it's being brave, being bold, and being a boss. And so being brave is about really taking it off, being vulnerable, finding what your flaws are, finding what your strengths are, and actually moving into that and identifying who your team is, right? The people who are going to support you in that vulnerable space, But then it's being bold and really trying to say, okay, I'm not confident. Why am I not confident? Is it these skills that I need, or these in negotiation with my work life, or is it with my relationship? And building those skills and figuring out what resources do I need. Is it financial planning? And identifying that, rather than just moving through life acting like it doesn't exist, and staying, sheltered because you're not sure how to do things. And I think being a boss is really about the fact of, a lot of times moms say they're the CEO of their household, but I've never seen any CEO doing every single thing in their company. Usually they're delegating. And so I think it's about having that vision, knowing that you're not the woman you were after motherhood, but knowing that I am a new woman, possibly a better woman, and trying to figure out what's the vision for me, the 2.0, and helping people get to that, right? So I think those are the pieces, and it definitely aligns with what you were talking about, of trying to use that change in terms of that transition into motherhood as a way to unpack all of these different layers.
How is being a super mom connected to the health and well-being of a woman and her family?
Oh, it's so connected. So I think the easiest connection from a health standpoint is mental health. So for moms, it can be taxing, really taxing mentally. There's a sense of never feeling like you've done enough. And ultimately, it is a sense of also these underpinnings of imposter syndrome, which is kind of societally placed on us, to feel like we don't deserve where we are and feeling like you're overcompensating to make sure people know I actually belong there. And so that causes certain anxiety. If you're not fulfilled, it can cause some depression if you feel like you haven't made it, quote unquote. But I think the most common thing is burnout from a health standpoint. With me, and I don't know, many of my guests on my podcast have talked about kind of this generational tradition that they've had where they're working themselves till they hit the ground, and they've seen their moms do it and their grandmothers do it. And there was a interesting post that I had on Instagram, which was about that Black women aren't strong because they had to be, because no one was strong for them. And so I think that we need to think about how can we're a communal people. Like Black people are communal. That's where our origins, and how do we rely and how do we work on those sister circles and really connect with each other. So I think that's it's one of the biggest things. But I think the second impact is not just moms, but moms, the most precious gift that they have are their kids, right? And what we don't discuss as much is the impact on our kids. When we show our kids that there can never be a break or time to relax, or showing that you're human enough to get stressed, right? My kids know when I'm stressed because I tell them, I'm stressed out, I'm going to the bathroom, I'm going to be there, and no one's going to come in there, I'm locking the door. But I think what happens with that, if that doesn't happen, it makes children have unrealistic ideals to what they have to become. Well, this was my mom, and she never was stressed out, and she never took a break. And it can promote a lot of anxiety in kids. So in addition, I think the other piece is that a lot of times super moms are just afraid or uncomfortable with showing emotion and being vulnerable. And with their kids, that's a problem, because now we're not teaching our kids that real milestone of how to be vulnerable and share what they're going through. It doesn't come out through words. It can come out through other maladaptive ways like aggression or grief or other health problems.
I'm definitely taking this all in. You know, your kids are younger. Mine are I'm saying I'm an old mom now. That's okay.
No.
It's like I'm an older mom, right? So I have teenagers, but I think had I had your podcast younger, when I was early momhood, I think, I would definitely have been an avid listener. I'm an avid listener now, even with older kids, because I think it's true, right? And I can check off those boxes without even realizing it. Even with my kids know when I'm stressed. They know when I don't have it together. So there's no illusion of grandeur in my household. My family knows when it's I don't come home as Dr. Mom, right? I come home as, is mom in a good mood today, or did she have a good day at work? Just being honest. But I think that's why it's so important, right? Because I think most of the times, when you read the magazines, I love Essence magazine, right? I have a picture of Michelle Obama on the cover, one of my dream boards, my vision boards. Yeah. But I think it's true. I think when we look at stories, it's kind of how can you be the perfect mom?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're right. But I think about Michelle Obama again, and I think about the fact that she, like I said, she was so vulnerable for the fact, okay, I'm going to put all of this stuff that you didn't have to know, you would never have known, in a book for everyone to read. I think that is so powerful, and I think, and it makes me view her in an even more, amazing way for her to be able to do that and have that courage.
That's a very good point. I'm glad there was a tie-in. I'm glad I had her on my vision board. I think anytime you can name drop on First Lotus Michelle Obama, right? I think it's great. And I think I read today that she's coming out with a journal to accompany that book.
Oh, whoa. Okay. Wow.
So I was okay, this is this should be very interesting, and hopefully one day I'll wish her that she'll participate on your podcast. So that's a nice segue into your podcast. So if you can tell us a little bit about Supermom Rehab, but I think I just wanted to take a step back as well, Omolara, and actually if you could define what a supermom is, and then sort of kind of segue into how that then ties into the podcast and the content, the information that you share on your podcast.
Yes. So this is how I, the supermom, okay, and there are researchers who talk about the Black superwoman syndrome, but I'm going to make my own definition. So, all of the researchers, just so you're disclaimer. But I think
the credentials, so I think you're okay.
I have read the background just so people know about superwoman syndrome, specifically Black superwoman syndrome, but that's a little bit different. And I feel like with motherhood, it's a mom who is extremely well-intentioned and really motivated, I feel, to do the best for her child, as most moms are. But I think there's a level of overcompensation, and she's been trying to do everything for her child and will do that even to the detriment of herself. So it's kind of the self-sacrificing type of motherhood that goes to an extreme. So, and I think the other piece of it is that a supermom also doesn't want to have that, wants that exterior to remain there, does not want anything to disrupt that exterior. And so for the podcast, really the goal of it, or the idea of it, was around just trying to make sure that we have a way for a few things. So the podcast is so new, as you know, but the mantra I usually say is, you see, kids don't begin with super moms, they begin with super supporting moms. And so it's trying to break the myth a little bit about the fact that, super moms are amazing, and can you believe what she's doing? She's doing all of this work. And a lot of times, if we really lay it back, a lot of those moms who are doing that would not choose to do all of the things that they're doing. And so what I've tried to focus on in the podcast is kind of what causes moms stress, and trying to provide them with the information and resources to support them, right? So if we think about it, a lot of times super moms are doing things because they feel like that's what they have to do. And if they had other information, resources that they could rely on, maybe that might help to ease the burden. I think the other piece is trying to do some of that reflection and helping moms uncover what contributed to their supermom habits. So in some of my episodes, a lot of the women have talked about doing some inner child work and really focusing in on your childhood and what contributed to why you're acting this way, and potentially that being, using potentially our children to think about what was the impact on that, and so what is the impact that you don't want to make for your children in that way. And I think the other piece of this is we've talked about a lot of things. We talked about stress management. We talked about kind of other things that give moms stress, how their kids are doing in school. So how to advocate for your child in school. Or we talked about kind of the mental health problems that occur and how to prevent some of that. You just mentioned earlier about the doula episode, and talking about and getting moms on the same page to really know, what does a doula do? And so now if I'm either headed into another birth, or potentially if I'm supporting a mom who is pregnant, I have some information about doula services and potentially seeing what the benefit is of that. And on the horizon, many people have reached out to me, which is amazing, honestly, about two of them that come to mind that will be coming up is how to incorporate exercise into motherhood, and another guest about embedding healthy eating, which is like the source of stress for so many moms of younger children in particular, but all within the context that these are all moms of color who are talking about it. And so they get some of the nuances, and they get that we're busy. They get that there's a lot on our plate. And I think, I haven't said it, but I think one of the most important things is that we have to do so much more, whether it be, you mentioned on an old podcast episode, the talk and having to prepare your kids. Yesterday, I actually had a conversation with my 7 and 4-year-old about Jim Crow and blackface. And these are things that we talk about because I know that they need to be prepared and need to understand the realities. And this may not happen in a white home. And so thinking about the added things that we have to do in our motherhood that other moms don't have to do, it's hard. It's hard not to be a super mom. But I think at least the podcast, I hope, is giving people some skills in terms of how to unlearn some of that.
Which I think is amazing, because I can think about, even just a few years ago with my kids were in high school. My youngest one is still in high school, and then just hoping, just addressing. I talk about race a lot, right? Because I think race is such a pinnacle intersection for families of color, in the sense of, in terms of identity, and then just even how that's all constructed, right? And then you can layer on gender, sexuality, sexual orientation, age. You layer all these, but then when you talk about racism, you talk about, those are really some hard conversations and things you sort of have to kind of address. But long-winded way of just saying that, I've had to have those conversations as, issues that come up with incidents at school, especially racist incidents, right? And then you go in trying not to be coming across as the angry Black mom and trying to sit there and listen and not have someone perceive you. I also have the additional issue too that, the people who look at me may not even think I am Black, right? But they know I have Black sons. So I still bring that to the table, and then just kind of having to deconstruct all that. But again, I think it's true, right? It's what you're taught. It's what you're sort of conditioned to do. Like you want to make sure that your kids are protected. There are these fears that you may have about your kids. You want to overprotect them in some ways, and so I think you're doing a great job, especially starting with moms with younger kids, but I think it's applicable even with older kids as well. And so I think that the universality of your podcast, I think, is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I did want to also talk a little bit about some of the other work that I think is, I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's spun off from the Supermom or it's sort of an offshoot of your other project, the OmolaraMD Health Solutions, in terms of the coaching that you offer for moms. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that work and how it ties, just being an extension of what you're doing with the podcast.
We started the conversation about kind of understanding the limits of the office, and that what I noticed for me was that I went into pediatrics because I loved kids, and was pleasantly surprised to understand that I was going to spend a lot of time talking to moms. What I found was that I just have this passion for talking to moms, to the point of really thinking about the fact that some of our pediatric visits, most kids are pretty well, would end up going long because it was just talking through certain issues with moms that had nothing to do with the child, but ultimately would have something to do with the child, whether it be relationship issues, whether it be financial strain. And I realized that the pediatric visit wasn't the outlet that was going to let me delve into that in the way that, having worked with moms, thousands of moms over 15 years that I've been a pediatrician, and having worked outside of this country, but in Africa as well, I think that it was just a necessary transition for me to be able to open up this door. And the leave was a seminal point for me to be able to think through that. And so the coaching program is called SupermomRehab Sisters, and it's basically a membership program. And it's really focused on exhausted and burned out working professional moms of color, particularly because I've found in my experience, that is kind of the high-risk group. And it actually, what we've been able to assemble is not only a framework of action steps, which include reflection work, which include work around creating an individual development plan, being able to figure out who your tribe is, how to delegate, how to say no, those kind of skills. But we also have guest experts who talk about financial coaching or life coaching. And then we offer kind of this longitudinal connection with moms where we're able to tap in like every week with group coaching where moms can connect with each other, but also connect with the actual work that they need to do and where they're at and what are the steps that they need to make. So I think for me, it's been really eye-opening to know that one, that there are moms who are really interested in trying to do the work. There's a lot of work in this to do to get themselves to a better place. But the part that is frustrating, of course, is the fact that most of the moms who enter in are burnt out, like kind of have hit that point. So it's trying to think about how can we see the light, at the end of the tunnel before we get there, and understand that we're on a path that is not that is headed for self-destruction, and try to intervene and get that support. I think the biggest thing that has been exciting is, building. There's a Facebook group that's a private group for this, but I have a Facebook group that's just open, and seeing how moms, I just opened it because I was like, we need a safe space for Black moms. And we just need a safe space to be able to talk about issues, but particularly to be able to understand to understand how to be vulnerable, how to ask questions, not to feel like you're going to be judged. And that was part of the ground rules. And I felt, maybe because I'm a pediatrician, maybe I'm going to have to be called upon to answer questions. And the way that moms have supported other moms and answered questions, that was just more support for this program. It said that not only is the professional support really helpful, but that peer community and peer support that a lot of moms don't get, they're in isolation a lot, is really extremely useful. And so that's kind of the program, and I've found it to be exciting.
You've done a lot of great work as well regarding immigrant health issues, and I'll have to have you on again to kind of talk about that other role.
I'm really grateful for spaces like this. And, I just wanted to kind of to tell you on air about kind of how much of an inspiration you are, to actually create a platform that's saying the things that, honestly, our, pediatrics has not really touched, and really kind of saying, look, there needs to be something that touches children of color, and there needs to be something that touches those families and lets them know that their concerns are valid and what they're going through are really important things that are meant to be discussed and not to be just pushed to the side. So I am honored to be on your podcast, honestly. And I am really, I'm really amazed at the work that you're doing. So I'm truly appreciative. And in any way, if this, is helpful for your audience, I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us this week on What is Black podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And for more information about the podcast, our blogs, and subscribe to our upcoming newsletter, go to our website at whatisblack.co. As always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode. And don't forget to leave us a review so we can continue to bring you fresh content. Until next time, thank you for listening.